Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're looking at the new Moto 360, the long-awaited sequel to one of the most liked smartwatches from back in the day, which was last released almost half a decade ago. So we want to dive in and see what's better about this watch. Honestly, I would say this is easily one of the most robust and arguably one of the best looking smartwatches coming out in the recent past. So I really like this watch for a lot of reasons. There's big pros, there's a couple cons you also want to know about if you're looking to buy this smartwatch, but we have a lot to talk about in this video. Let's get into it. So I want to start off by talking about what comes in the box with this watch. Now, normally I don't really cover that, but with this one, I think it's actually pretty interesting because what you get is not only one of the three different colors they have, and they have a silver one, a black one, and a rose gold one. So you get the watch, you get whatever band you think you're getting on the front, but it also comes with a second watch band. So right here I have the rose gold one, which came with a white band, not a huge fan of that one, but it also comes with the brown band, the leather band, and I think coming with two different bands actually is really nice. So yes, you can go out and buy another one. It's a pretty common 20mm band, but being able to just have two in the box means that just opening the box, you already have a workout mode with the rubber one. You can go swimming with that, you can run with that, and then you can put the leather strap on, which is a little bit classier. You can wear it out to dinner, you can wear it to work, and so you almost have like two totally different watches in one box. This also has a charger, which is slightly different from the old Moto 360 chargers, which were key charging or Qi. But what we have here is actually, it's kind of a little cradle that comes in the box, and the cradle allows you, it fits in one orientation and it charges really, really quickly, which I think is an interesting way to get around the battery problem with smartwatches, where normally when you get a smartwatch, they typically last like only a day, 2 days, 3 days, and you'll charge it for an hour and a half or 2 hours. Now this one charges really fast. So what you can do is you just plop it on there. It goes from 0% all the way to 100% in just 60 minutes, which means that it's 355 milliamp hour battery, which means you can last approximately 48 hours on a single charge. And before anyone discredits that and says that's not long enough, just think about every other day when you're getting ready in the morning, maybe for an hour, you just plop this on the charger, it charges back up, and you're good for another 2 days. For me, I think that is actually a pretty good solution temporarily until the next couple of years as we start to really improve battery technology. Getting into the actual hardware of this watch, I want to give you guys a physical tour and show you everything you have to know about this watch before buying it. Starting with the front, you'll see that you do have a 1.2-inch AMOLED screen there. It's really bright, has adaptive brightness, as most new watches do, but it looks really, really good. I love the color on this. I like the brightness of it. On the right side, you actually only have 2 buttons. And so instead of having like the middle button with the little crown and then 2 other buttons like you see on like the Fossil Gen 5, for example, this one you just have a little crown on the top, so you can push it, and that button will bring you to it'll be back. Your top button's either your back button, your home button, or from the home screen, it opens up your app drawer, and then you can spin it and kind of just navigate through your apps really easily. So that's one use of the top button. The bottom button, you can actually tap that and it'll open up just whatever app you have preset for that, and you can customize this. I forgot to mention, if you tap and hold the top button, it opens up Google Assistant. And so this watch has Google Assistant, as most Wear OS watches do. And it makes it really nice to use, really easy, because you do have a microphone on this watch, which means that you can ask it for the weather, you can ask it to do whatever Google Assistant does, you can pretty much do it on this watch. You'll also see on the right side and the top, you have 2 little holes. So you have your microphone, you have your barometer, which of course is pretty standard on a lot of Wear OS watches, actually a lot of smartwatches in general. On the left side, you'll see a really simple, just the glossy look right there, and there is no speaker on this watch. That's something to note, and I'll get back to that later on, but not having a speaker on this watch does kind of mean that you won't be fielding phone calls on here. Google Assistant is going to be visual only, and you won't be getting any kind of verbal or audible feedback from that. Then we do also have on the back of this watch the heart rate sensor. And I think the heart rate sensor on this one is pretty standard. So you do have just 2 little heart sensing diodes, but we have the common aesthetic here throughout the entire watch where you have this kind of like spiral, almost ripple aesthetic there. So you have it on the back, you see it on the rubber watch band, and you also see that on the dial right there. and I think it's kind of a nice texture. It's a pretty distinct look for this watch. Now, the body of the watch is actually a really thick stainless steel here, so it should be really strong. It shouldn't really have any problem with like denting or anything like that, but I will say that the top does get a little bit scratched. I think it's just because it's a very high gloss finish on the rose gold finish of the stainless steel, so I am getting some really tiny micro scratches there just from a couple days of use. It also gets smudged up a little bit on the top, but because it's such a small, thin bezel there, you don't always notice the fingerprints, because on the side then, the bulk of the body is actually kind of a satin finish on the rose gold on the steel. So I think that they did a good job with the aesthetic here, and of course the buttons themselves are also high gloss. This watch also has kind of a second bezel underneath, as we see with a lot of smartwatches. So you have the high gloss rose gold bezel on the top, and then under the glass, which is, by the way, Corning Gorilla Glass 3, should be very durable. But under that glass, we have another kind of black bezel before we finally get to the screen. So 1.2 inch screen, 42 millimeter body. We do have not the best screen to body ratio, but for a lot of smartwatches, that's pretty standard. And so I really can't hold that against this watch, because I think they did a pretty good job of using just the colors and aesthetic of this to kind of distract your eyes away from that. And then this is also waterproof, or essentially swim rated for 3 atmospheres, which they tested for 10,000 strokes, which means if you're showering, washing your hands, sweating, swimming, whatever you're doing, as long as it's not like scuba diving, in almost every situation, you will be okay with getting this watch wet, which I think is really nice. I think it's a great way to have this watch be completely versatile. And speaking of that, let's get into a little bit more of the internal components of this watch to really discuss how well this works in fitness conditions and whatever you can actually do with this watch. So as far as the processor goes, it has a Snapdragon 3100 chip, which is a little bit of an antiquated system, but it's currently the best that Qualcomm has to offer, which means that this watch is actually one of the better watches out there as far as the processor goes. It works pretty quickly, and most of the apps you'll use work really seamlessly. You also have 8 gigabytes of onboard storage here, which means you can get music on here, you can have pictures, you can have a bunch of different apps. You can really use this watch for quite a bit. You also have 1 gigabyte of RAM, which again means that your apps can work really well on here. So between those 3 main specs, it's pretty common among the more premium Wear OS watches. So we see that in the Fossil Gen 5 and the Skagen Falster 3, which I will actually compare the 3 of these watches in a future video. If you want to see that, make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon below so you don't miss that video. As far as sensors go on this watch, this has an accelerometer, a gyroscope, a barometer, a heart rate sensor, and ambient light detection. So all of those kind of enable you to do a lot with this watch, with exercise and just with general use. So having like the accelerometer means you can do some wrist gestures with it. Having the ambient light detection means you don't have to set the brightness and change it all the time. I always leave that on, so in bright settings, it just changes the screen brightness automatically. Now, inside, talking about the transponders that this watch has, it has Wi-Fi, which is nice. Means that you can, if your phone's dead or something, you can still use the apps on this watch as long as you're connected to Wi-Fi. This does not have 4G or LTE connectivity, which I don't really see as a big drawback for me. Some people might see that as a drawback though. This has Bluetooth 4.2 low energy, so you're connecting to your phone by Bluetooth, but you can also connect earbuds to this if you're listening to music when you're running or something. And that's something that I really like about watches like this one. So I say this in almost all of my videos, I love being able to go for a run or go for a walk or whatever kind of workout you're doing, just leave your phone behind and just go and listen to music that you have downloaded with the 8 gigabytes of storage, and you can go out and not have to worry about carrying your phone. Now, when you're working out and running, another thing is this actually has GPS on board, which means you can track your workouts really well with GPS. And then lastly, it also has NFC, which is great for doing things like Google Pay, when you can actually pay on vending machines or whatever has the touchless payment. So looking at the app, this is really going to be based on the Google Wear app, and it does have a bunch of different watch faces that you can use that are kind of custom for this watch. So they're going to be like the Moto 360 ones. You can go out and find other watch faces if you want, but most of what you're doing as far as settings go, like you can do a little bit of rearranging tiles and stuff in the app here, but most of it really is going to be on the watch. Now, I mentioned before that this watch was originally, so the early Moto 360s from like 5-6 years ago, they were made by Motorola, the first 2. Now this one is actually not made by Motorola anymore. Now this is instead made by a company called eBuy Now, And what they've done is they picked up on this and they're using the same branding. They have an agreement with Motorola. Honestly, I think they did a really good job picking up with this watch from where it left off and just modernizing it as much as possible, so we have the internal specs are really on par with what we expect for a modern Wear OS watch. It also has a really durable design where it's a very thick stainless steel. I think it looks really good. It feels really, really premium. And I actually want to get into the pros and cons now of this watch. So like I said, the pros for this one, it feels really durable, really premium. It looks really nice. I like the watch faces that it comes with. I think that overall, the fitness tracking is reasonably accurate. It's good enough for most people when they're trying to track basic runs. If you are like a marathon runner or something, maybe this is not the best watch for you, but I don't think you'd be watching this video anyway. If you are running a marathon, you probably don't want something this big anyway. Now, getting into the cons of this watch, this doesn't have key charging or like I said, key, whatever charging. So you can't charge this on the back of a phone like you can with the Galaxy Watch Active 2. And it has its own little charging pad, which I do like the charging pad. That's another thing on the pro side. I like how fast it does charge, but having wireless charging, I want watch companies to all use the same style of charging so we don't have all these different chargers. I think it'd be just a much better world if they all used that same type of charging that you could charge on the back of your phone, on the little charging pads and stuff like that. Wear OS is not always the best interface. It's easy to use, has some decent apps in there. I like how well it works, but Google doesn't seem to pay that much attention to it. Now that they bought out Fitbit though, maybe we're gonna have something big coming in the next year, who knows? This also has no speaker, like I said. I think that's definitely a drawback. And on top of that, something I didn't mention before is the battery controls. So something like the Gen 5, which I keep comparing this to, mainly because the Gen 5 was a really popular smartwatch that's a Wear OS watch from 2019, but what that had that this one does not is battery controls. So this one you can either go in regular battery mode or like super power saving mode, which shuts down like pretty much everything and just tells you the time. Now, there is no customization in between. You can go in and like manually turn off like Wi-Fi or turn off GPS or something, but there is no just quick battery setting that does all of that for you. And I think that's a little bit of a drawback that probably wouldn't have been that difficult to implement, but it's something that they didn't have in this watch. And then the very last one is probably the price. This feels really premium, and I think it's probably worth the money, but the price is $350 when you buy this watch new. So for some people, that is a little bit out of range. I don't know, for some people it's not. For me, I do really like this watch, and I do recommend it to anybody who thinks that this style, this aesthetic looks good. Now, if you're interested in this watch, but you don't know if, I don't know, is it better than the Gen 5? Is it better than the Skagen Foster 3? Is it better than other Wear OS watches? Then what you want to do right now is probably subscribe to my channel, or at least head over to my channel and see if I've released that video yet, because I am going to compare them side by side in a video in the next couple days. So make sure you don't miss that one. As always, guys, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.